Caleb's hands shook as he gripped the controls of his damaged starship. Alarms blared, red lights flickered, and smoke choked the cockpit. Through the cracked viewport, the lush green surface of Darkus loomed closer with every second. "Come on, you bucket of bolts," he muttered, wrestling the controls to keep the ship's nose up. The dense canopy of alien trees rushed toward him. Caleb braced himself, his thoughts flashing back to the relentless chase that had driven him to this uncharted world. The ship slammed into the jungle floor, and his head snapped forward as darkness swallowed him. Ene's azure skin glistened under the humid jungle air as she knelt, carefully collecting medicinal herbs into her basket. A deafening crash echoed through the forest, making her freeze. Dropping her basket, she darted toward the source of the sound, her lithe frame weaving gracefully between massive tree trunks. As she reached the clearing, Ene's breath caught. A strange metal craft lay half buried in the soil, its sleek surface marred by jagged tears, smoke billowing from its ruptured hull. Her heart pounded as she crept closer, torn between fear and curiosity. Through a shattered section of the cockpit, she saw him, a man slumped unconscious over the controls, blood trickling down his temple. His pale skin and dark hair were unlike anything she'd seen before, his features striking even in their current state. Without hesitation, Ene forced the damaged hatch open and climbed inside. Up close, he was even more captivating. His pale complexion contrasted sharply with the vibrant greens and blues of the jungle, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Pressing 2 fingers to his neck, she sighed in relief at the steady pulse. Drawing on the ancient healing practices of her people, Ene leaned in, her lips hovering just above his. She took a steadying breath, channeling her energy, and pressed her lips firmly to his. Caleb's eyes flew open as consciousness surged back. The first thing he saw was a pair of vivid violet eyes inches from his own. Startled, he jerked back, instinctively reaching for the blaster at his side. "Easy there, spaceman," a melodic voice said with a hint of amusement. "Is that how you thank someone who just saved your life?" As his vision cleared, Caleb froze. Perched on the edge of his pilot's seat was the most stunning woman he'd ever seen. Her shimmering blue skin seemed to glow faintly in the sunlight filtering through the trees. Long, iridescent hair framed a face that was as alien as it was beautiful. What?" he managed to stammer, his usual composure shattered. The woman laughed softly, a sound like wind chimes. "Welcome to Darkus," she said, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "I'm Ene, and you are?" Caleb flinched at her touch as she traced a finger along his jawline. "Nobody," he said gruffly, pulling back to put distance between them in the cramped cockpit. "Thanks for the help, but I've got to go." Ene raised an eyebrow, her expression one of mock offense. "Oh, you're welcome," she said, her tone teasing. "Good luck with that, spaceman." "So rude. And after I used the sacred kiss of life to save you," Ene teased, her full lips curving into a mischievous grin. "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone if you enjoyed it." Caleb felt heat creeping up his neck. "That's not, wait, kiss of life?" "Oh, yes," Ene said with a solemn nod, though her eyes sparkled with amusement. "A most sacred and ancient ritual. Sometimes, it even requires multiple attempts to fully work." Despite himself, Caleb felt the corners of his mouth twitch upward. It had been a long time since he'd let himself engage in light-hearted banter, but the reality of his situation quickly snapped back into focus. "Listen, Ene," he said, his tone turning serious. "I appreciate your help, but I'm in trouble. The less you know about me, the safer you'll be." Ene's expression softened, a mix of curiosity and concern shadowing her vibrant features. "You're injured, and your skyboat is destroyed," she said gently. "At least let me take you to my village. We can tend to your wounds and figure out what to do next." Caleb hesitated. Every instinct told him to keep moving, to stay away from others. But his ship was beyond repair, and this alien jungle was an unknown threat. "Fine," he relented, "but just for a little while. I can't stay long." Ene's face lit up, her joy so genuine it was almost contagious. "Wonderful. You're going to love it. We don't get many visitors from the stars. Everyone will be so excited to meet you." As they left the ship, Caleb winced at the harsh sunlight and leaned against the hull for support. His head throbbed, and a sharp ache in his side made him suspect a cracked rib. "Here," Ene said, slipping under his arm to steady him. Her touch was cool and firm, her presence oddly comforting as she guided him. They began moving through the dense jungle, Na leading him along barely visible trails with ease. As they walked, she peppered him with questions. What's it like out there, beyond the stars? How many worlds have you seen? Have you ever met any really strange aliens? Besides me, of course, she added with a playful wink. Caleb chuckled despite himself. It's big, he replied. Lots of worlds, lots of people, some good, some bad. And which are you? Na asked lightly, though her gaze turned searching. Caleb looked away. Just someone trying to stay alive, he muttered. Na squeezed his hand gently, her touch a surprising comfort. Well, you've come to the right place. Darkus has a way of healing wounds you didn't even know you had. As they continued, Caleb found himself increasingly distracted by her. The way she moved with effortless grace, the floral scent of her hair, the melodic rhythm of her voice, it all stirred something in him he hadn't felt in years. So, he asked, desperate to refocus, your people, are they all as, welcoming as you? Na laughed, a sound as light as a breeze. Oh, yes, we're a very affectionate lot. You'll see when we reach the village. I hope you're ready for lots of hugs. Caleb's face paled. Hugs? I'm not really the hugging type, Caleb muttered stiffly. Na's eyes sparkled with amusement. Well, we'll just have to work on that, won't we? Before Caleb could respond, the jungle gave way to a large clearing, and he froze, his breath catching at the sight before him. A village unlike anything he'd ever imagined lay nestled among the towering trees. Graceful structures of living wood intertwined with shimmering crystal seemed to grow organically from the forest, glowing faintly in the waning light. Blue-skinned people of all ages bustled about, pausing to wave warmly at Na and her guest. Welcome to Arborea, Na said with pride. My home. As they stepped into the village, Caleb's tension grew. Years of living on edge made him wary of the curious looks and friendly smiles that followed him. His unease deepened when an older man with elaborate facial markings approached, arms outstretched. Naca, my child, the man exclaimed, his voice rich and welcoming. And who is this intriguing stranger you've brought to us? Father, Na replied, inclining her head respectfully. This is, well, I haven't actually gotten his name yet, but his skyboat fell from the heavens, and he needs our help. The older man's eyes lit with excitement. A visitor from the stars? How marvelous. Before Caleb could react, the man stepped forward and wrapped him in an enthusiastic hug. Caleb stiffened, every instinct screaming to shove the man away, but he forced himself to stay still, painfully aware of Na's amused smirk. I am Zorin, chief of Arborea, the man said, releasing Caleb at last. You are most welcome here, traveler. Come, join us for the evening meal and share stories of your journey. Thank you, Caleb said cautiously, but I really need to focus on fixing my ship. I can't stay long. Zorin waved dismissively. Nonsense. You're injured and need rest. The ship can wait until morning. Tonight, we celebrate your arrival. Before Caleb could argue, the villagers swept him into the heart of their festivities. Everywhere he turned, there were cheerful faces, curious questions, and far too many embraces for his liking. Through it all, Na stayed close, her presence an odd mix of comfort and unease. She seemed to sense his discomfort, skillfully guiding him away from the more exuberant villagers and carving out brief moments of reprieve. As the sun dipped low, casting the village in golden hues, Caleb found himself seated at a long table laden with vibrant fruits and unfamiliar dishes. The entire village had gathered, their chatter and laughter filling the air. Try this, Na said, handing him a glowing purple fruit. It's one of our specialties. Caleb hesitated before taking a tentative bite. His eyes widened as an explosion of sweet, tart, and subtly spicy flavors filled his mouth. Good, isn't it? Na grinned, leaning in closer. Just wait until you try our wines. Despite his wariness, Caleb found himself relaxing as the evening wore on. The villagers' genuine kindness and Na's playful humor chipped away at his defenses. For the first time in years, he let himself enjoy the moment, the weight of his past briefly forgotten. But as the celebration began to quiet and the stars emerged, reality returned like a cold wind. Caleb couldn't afford to lower his guard, not with the danger that loomed over him. I need some air, he muttered to Na, rising abruptly from the table. She nodded in understanding and stood, offering her hand. I know a place, she said softly. Come with me. Na led him away from the village, guiding him down a faintly glowing path bathed in moonlight. Caleb followed in silence, marveling at the surreal beauty of Darkus. Bioluminescent plants cast cast an ethereal glow across the forest, and the calls of unseen creatures echoed softly from the shadows. Eventually, they stepped into a clearing dominated by a massive tree. Its trunk was wider than Caleb's ship, and its branches stretched impossibly high into the star-strewn sky. The heart tree, Na said with quiet reverence, the oldest and wisest living thing on Darkus. Some say it remembers when the first star was born. Caleb stared up at the colossal tree, the weight of its ancient presence pressing on him. It's incredible, he murmured. Na smiled faintly, a note of pride in her voice. I come here when I need to think or find clarity. I thought it might help you too. They stood together in silence, the stillness of the moment calming Caleb in a way he hadn't felt in years. But then Na turned to him, her expression shifting to one of quiet intensity. I know you're running from something, she said gently. I can see it in your eyes, hear it in the way you talk. But whatever it is, you're safe here. Darkus protects its own. Caleb shook his head, his jaw tightening. You don't understand. The people after me, they won't stop. They'll tear this place apart to get to me. I can't stay, for your safety as much as mine. Na stepped closer, her violet eyes searching his. Then let us help you. My people have knowledge and technology that could— No, Caleb interrupted sharply. I won't put you or your people in danger. Once my ship is fixed, I'm gone. For a moment, a flicker of hurt crossed her face, but it quickly hardened into determination. You're so focused on running, she said softly, you can't see what's right in front of you. Before Caleb could respond, Na stepped closer, her lips meeting his in a kiss that was both tender and unyielding. For an instant, everything else faded, his fears, his past, even the danger hunting him. There was only Na, and the electric pull between them. Then reality slammed back into him. Caleb pulled away, his breath ragged. I can't, he said, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry, I just can't. Na studied him sadly, her gaze unwavering. Can't or won't? She asked, her tone almost a whisper. There's a difference. With that, she turned and walked back toward the village, leaving Caleb standing alone beneath the ancient branches of the heart tree. He watched her go, torn by conflicting emotions, a fierce longing he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years, and the grim duty that had kept him alive for so long. As dawn broke, painting the horizon in soft hues, Caleb made his decision. He would repair his ship and leave Darkus. It was the only way to keep Na and her people safe. But as he trudged back toward the village, another thought surfaced, quiet, insistent, and impossible to ignore. What if there was another way? Sweat dripped from Caleb's brow as he worked on his battered ship, his hands deftly repairing its damaged systems. The jungle's heat pressed down on him, made worse by his refusal to take off his heavy flight jacket, a stubborn habit he couldn't quite let go of. Old habits were hard to break. At the faint rustling of leaves nearby, Caleb tensed, his hand instinctively moving to his blaster. He relaxed only slightly when Na emerged from the dense greenery with her usual effortless grace. The dappled sunlight seemed to make her blue skin glow, and Caleb found himself momentarily caught off guard by the sight. Still at it, I see, Na said, her voice tinged with concern. You've been working since dawn. Caleb shrugged, turning back to the exposed wiring of his ship. Not much choice. This thing isn't going to fix itself. Na sighed softly as she stepped closer. You know, there's more to life than constant vigilance and escape plans. When was the last time you allowed yourself to just stop? Stopping gets you killed, Caleb muttered, though the words lacked their usual conviction. Na tilted her head thoughtfully, then reached into a small pouch at her side, pulling out an iridescent fruit. Maybe this will change your mind. We call it the ice melter. One bite, and even the coldest heart begins to thaw. Caleb narrowed his eyes at the fruit. What is it? Some kind of drug? Na laughed, a bright, melodic sound that seemed to lighten the air around them. Nothing so sinister, just a local delicacy. Unless, of course, you're afraid to try it. Her teasing tone and the spark in her violet eyes left Caleb no room for retreat. With a sigh, he took the fruit. Fine, but if I end up hallucinating, you're the one to blame. He bit into it cautiously, then paused as an explosion of flavors hit his tongue, sweet, tart, with a subtle warmth that spread through his chest. His expression softened despite himself. This is amazing. Na smiled, her pride evident. See, not everything unknown is dangerous. Caleb continued eating, and as he did, a strange sense of calm began to settle over him. The ever-present tension in his shoulders loosened, and he became more aware of the the world around him, the vibrant hues of the jungle, the songs of alien birds, and the faint, intoxicating scent of Na's skin as she stood close. He shook his head slightly, trying to refocus. I should get back to work. Na placed a hand on his arm, and the sudden warmth of her touch sent a jolt through him. You've been working non-stop. Surely you can spare a little time to see my world. He hesitated, every logical part of him screaming to refuse. Staying here was reckless. It put Na and her people at risk, but as he looked into her eyes, filled with hope and wonder, his resolve faltered. All right, he murmured. Show me your world. Na's face lit up with delight, and she took his hand, leading him away from the wrecked ship and deeper into the jungle. She pointed out the wonders of Darkus as they walked, flowers that glowed softly with an inner light, enormous trees with crystalline spirals etched into their bark, and small, curious creatures that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Caleb found himself mesmerized. He'd visited countless worlds, but none like this, and certainly none with a guide like Na. Her joy was infectious, her laughter melting through the barriers he'd built around himself. As the day passed, Caleb found himself opening up, sharing carefully chosen fragments of his past. In turn, he marveled at Na's stories, her humor, and the way she spoke of her world with love and pride. Eventually, they reached the edge of a pristine lake. Its surface was so still and clear that it reflected the alien sky perfectly, creating the illusion of a portal to another world. Caleb stared at the scene, his breath catching. It's beautiful, he said softly. Na stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the horizon. There's so much more I want to show you, she said, her voice quiet but full of meaning. Caleb couldn't find the words to respond, the beauty of the world, and the woman beside him, leaving him uncharacteristically lost for words. Na turned to Caleb, her expression unusually serious. You're not what I expected, she said softly. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what did you expect? The way you act, I thought you'd be cold, detached. But there's warmth in you, Caleb, a light. You just keep it hidden behind all that armor. He looked away, her words striking a chord he wasn't ready to confront. You don't know me, Na. The things I've done, the people I've hurt, I'm not a good man. Na stepped closer, placing her hand gently against his cheek. I think you are. You're a man who's had to make impossible choices, but that doesn't define you. Her touch, her words, the beauty of Darkus, it was overwhelming. Something inside Caleb snapped. Without thinking, he pulled Na close, capturing her lips in a deep, desperate kiss. For a moment, the world fell silent. Then, slowly, Na melted into his embrace, returning the kiss with equal intensity. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing heavily. I'm sorry, Caleb said, his voice unsteady. I shouldn't have. Na pressed a finger to his lips, silencing him. Don't you dare apologize for that, she said, a mischievous smile spreading across her face. In fact, I think we should try again, just to be sure. As they kissed once more, Caleb felt his carefully constructed walls crumble. Against all logic, he was falling for this extraordinary alien woman. Later, as they made their way back to the village, Caleb's thoughts raced. He knew he needed to leave. Staying here was dangerous for Na and her people. But the idea of never seeing her again, of losing the connection they'd just begun to share, was unbearable. You're brooding again, Na teased, nudging him playfully. What's going on in that complicated head of yours? Caleb sighed. Just thinking about consequences. Na's expression softened. Not everything has to have consequences, Caleb. Sometimes, things can just be good. As they reached the edge of the village, Caleb made a decision. There's something I want to show you, he said. Na's eyes lit up with curiosity. A secret. I love secrets. Lead the way. They returned to the crash site, the battered starship looking even more out of place amid the jungle's vibrant beauty. Caleb led Na inside, guiding her through the tilted corridors until they reached a small storage compartment. Close your eyes, he said. Na arched a brow but complied, a playful smile tugging at her lips. Caleb rummaged through the compartment before pulling out a small insulated container. He opened it carefully, then turned back to her. All right, you can look now. Na opened her eyes, her gaze landing on the strange object in his hands. What is it? She asked, leaning closer. It's called ice cream, Caleb explained. A dessert from my homeworld. This is the last of it. I've been saving it for. I don't know what, but I want you to have it. Na's violet eyes widened in delight. A gift from the stars. I'm honored. She reached out but hesitated, her fingers hovering near the cold container. How do I? Caleb chuckled, scooping a spoonful of the creamy treat. Like this, he he said, offering it to her. Na leaned forward, her lips wrapping around the spoon. The moment the ice cream touched her tongue, she froze. Her eyes widened in shock, pupils dilating as the unfamiliar sensation hit her. Cold. Na gasped, her eyes wide. So cold. But, what happened next nearly made Caleb drop the container. Na began to move, her body writhing in a sinuous, mesmerizing rhythm as pure delight seemed to course through her. Soft, involuntary moans escaped her lips, each one sending a jolt through Caleb. He stood frozen, torn between embarrassment and an unbidden wave of desire. He'd never seen anyone react to ice cream like this before. Finally, Na stilled, her breathing heavy. She turned to Caleb, her violet eyes glowing with an intensity that made his heart pound. That, she purred, her voice low and sultry, was the most incredible thing I've ever tasted. Before Caleb could form a reply, she surged forward, kissing him with fiery passion. The faint taste of vanilla mingled with her own exotic flavor, a combination that made Caleb's thoughts scatter. Whatever hesitation he'd clung to melted in an instant. They stumbled out of the ship, their lips never parting. The cool night air of Darkus wrapped around them as they sank into the soft grass beneath a canopy of stars. What followed was a night unlike anything Caleb had ever known. Na's luminous blue skin glowed in the moonlight, her movements fluid and graceful, like the jungle itself had come alive in her form. Together, they explored uncharted sensations, their connection raw and electric. When dawn broke, Caleb lay awake, Na curled against him, her breath soft and steady. The memory of the night filled him with both joy and dread. He had opened himself in a way he hadn't in years, allowing emotions he'd long buried to resurface. But with that vulnerability came a chilling reality. He had given his pursuers the ultimate weapon against him. Na stirred, her violet eyes fluttering open. She smiled, a radiant warmth lighting her face, but her expression shifted as she caught the turmoil in his gaze. "What's wrong?" she asked gently. Caleb took a deep breath, knowing he couldn't hide the truth from her any longer. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice heavy, "about who I am, and why I'm here." Over the next hour, Caleb told her everything. He spoke of the shadowy organization he had once served, the horrors he had witnessed and committed, and the breaking point that drove him to sabotage a mission and flee. "They've been chasing me ever since," he finished, unable to meet her eyes. "Being here, I've put you and your people in danger. They won't stop until they find me." A thick silence settled between them. Caleb braced himself for the rejection, the fear, the anger he was sure would follow. But when he finally looked at Na, he saw none of that. Her eyes were filled with compassion. "Oh, Caleb," she said softly, her voice full of understanding. "You've carried this weight alone for so long, but you don't have to anymore." He shook his head. "You don't get it. These people, they'll stop at nothing. If I stay, they'll destroy everything to get to me. I have to leave. It's the only way to keep you safe." Na sat up, her expression resolute. "No," she said firmly. "Running isn't the answer anymore. Not this time. We can fight this together." "How?" Caleb asked, his voice edged with desperation, yet a flicker of hope sparked within him. Na's eyes gleamed with determination. "My people have their own secrets, Caleb, ancient technologies, hidden for generations. They've protected us, kept Darkus concealed from the outside world. But now," her voice grew stronger, "perhaps it's time to use them for something more." She stood, her hand reaching out to pull him to his feet. Caleb let her help him up, a strange mix of fear and resolve settling in his chest. For the first time in a long time, the idea of standing still and fighting didn't feel impossible. It felt like hope. "Come with me. There's something you need to see," Na said, urgency laced in her voice. As they moved through the awakening village, Caleb's emotions churned, a mix of fear for what lay ahead and an unfamiliar spark of hope. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine something beyond mere survival. Na led him to a hidden cave, concealed behind the cascading spray of a shimmering waterfall. Stepping inside, Caleb followed her deeper into the earth, the air growing cooler and heavier. Glowing symbols adorned the walls, pulsing faintly with a mysterious energy. "What is this place?" Caleb asked, his voice tinged with awe. Na's tone was reverent. "The heart of Darkus, the source of our planet's power and protection, and, perhaps, the key to your freedom." They emerged into a vast chamber, and Caleb's breath caught at the sight. Towering crystalline structures pulsed with radiant light, casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the cavern. At the center of it all stood a massive pillar of swirling energy, its core so bright it was almost painful to look at. "This is incredible," Caleb murmured, struggling to process the sheer alien beauty surrounding him. Na nodded, her blue skin taking on a radiant glow under the chamber's light. "The heart of Darkus surface has shielded our world for millennia. Its energy protects us from detection, extending far beyond the atmosphere. Caleb's mind raced. That's why my ship crashed, isn't it? Some kind of interference, a side effect of this protection? Yes, NA confirmed, but the heart can do so much more. With the proper knowledge, we can use its power to create a barrier impenetrable to any threat. Before Caleb could respond, a distant boom echoed through the chamber. The crystalline structures around them flickered, their light dimming briefly. NA's face turned pale. No, it can't be. Caleb's hand instinctively moved to his blaster. What is it? An attack? Her voice was tight with fear. Something's breached our outer defenses. The realization hit Caleb like a blow to the chest. They found me. Damn it. I should have left sooner. NA gripped his arm, her violet eyes blazing. This isn't your fault, Caleb, but we don't have much time. I can activate the heart's full defenses, but it's not immediate, it'll take time. Another boom, closer this time, shook the ground beneath their feet. Faint bursts of weapons fire echoed from the distance. How much time do you need? Caleb asked, though he already dreaded the answer. 10 minutes, maybe less, if I push it, NA said, her voice firm. But once I start, there's no stopping. You'll need to hold them off. Caleb nodded grimly. I'll do what I can, but, NA, if this doesn't work, she silenced him with a fierce kiss, her determination matching the fire in her gaze. It will work, and when it's over, I expect you to still be standing. Got it? A faint smile tugged at Caleb's lips. Yes. With one last look, Caleb turned and sprinted toward the cavern entrance. As he stepped back into the jungle, the sounds of battle grew louder. Smoke rose in the direction of the village, and flashes of weapons fire illuminated the foliage. Caleb gripped his blaster tighter, bracing himself. He would do whatever it took to buy NA the time she needed. Caleb's tactical instincts took over as he assessed the unfolding chaos. The attackers were focused on the village, likely assuming he was hiding there. It gave him a slight advantage, but it wouldn't last. Moving silently through the dense underbrush, he used the jungle's natural cover to approach the outskirts. Through the foliage, he caught his first glimpse of the enemy. Black-clad soldiers moved in coordinated formations, their faces obscured by opaque visors. Caleb's chest tightened as he recognized the insignia on their armor, a mark he knew all too well. Steeling himself, Caleb stepped out of cover and opened fire. His first shots caught the soldiers off guard, dropping two before they could react. The remaining troops quickly adapted, returning fire and forcing Caleb to retreat back into the jungle. What followed was a deadly game of cat and mouse. Caleb struck fast, using guerrilla tactics to take down isolated soldiers, then melted into the shadows before their comrades could retaliate. But the numbers weren't in his favor. The soldiers pressed forward with relentless precision, inching closer to the cavern entrance. As Caleb began to question how long he could hold them off, a flash of blue streaked through the jungle. NA erupted from the underbrush, her movements impossibly fast and fluid. Before the soldiers could react, she was among them, her strikes landing with surgical precision. Limbs blurred as she disarmed and incapacitated 3 soldiers in mere moments, her fighting style a seamless blend of power and grace. Caleb watched in astonishment, momentarily forgetting to fire. NA moved like a force of nature, slipping past attacks and delivering devastating counterstrikes. He snapped back to action, using the distraction to flank the remaining soldiers. Together, his marksmanship and NA's combat mastery swiftly neutralized the squad. As the last soldier hit the ground, NA turned to Caleb with a triumphant grin. Thought you might need a hand. Caleb shook his head in disbelief. Where the hell did you learn to fight like that? NA smirked. Did you think we've stayed hidden all these years by being pacifists? My people have been warriors for generations. We just don't advertise it. Their conversation was cut short by a distant explosion. Caleb's stomach sank as he saw more soldiers advancing through the village, their weapons blazing. We have to get back to the heart, NA said urgently. I've done most of the preparation, but the final activation needs both of us. They sprinted toward the waterfall, concealing the cavern entrance, dodging enemy fire as they went. Just as they reached the cascading water, a sharp pain exploded in Caleb's shoulder. He stumbled, barely managing to stay upright before NA caught him. I'm fine, Caleb grunted, though the spreading heat of the wound told told him otherwise. We have to keep moving. Na's violet eyes flashed with concern, but she nodded, helping him into the cavern. The sound of shouting soldiers echoed behind them, growing closer with every second. As they reached the central chamber, Caleb's vision blurred and his knees wobbled. He leaned heavily on Na, forcing himself to stay upright. What do I need to do? He asked, his voice strained with pain. Na guided him to a crystalline console near the pillar of swirling energy. Place your hand here, she said, her tone steady despite the urgency in her movements. The heart needs to recognize you as a protector of Darkus, Na said. Caleb hesitated, doubt flashing across his face. Na, I'm not. I've done terrible things. I'm no protector. Na cupped his face in her hands, her violet eyes locking onto his with unwavering intensity. You are, to me, and to this world. Trust in that. Taking a shaky breath, Caleb placed his hand on the console. A surge of energy coursed through him instantly. The pain in his shoulder vanished, replaced by a warm, comforting sense of belonging. The energy pillar flared brilliantly, tendrils of light spreading outward. They raced along the crystalline structures, climbing the walls of the cavern and extending beyond. Caleb could feel the power unfurling, enveloping the entire planet in its protective embrace. A thunderous boom reverberated through the chamber as the barrier snapped into place. The sounds of battle outside ceased, replaced by an eerie silence. Na's face lit up with joy. It worked. Darkus is safe. Relief washed over Caleb, and he sagged against the console, the adrenaline draining from his system. A laugh bubbled up in his chest, low at first but quickly building into full-bodied laughter. Na stared at him in surprise before joining in, her laughter bright and unrestrained. In the glow of the heart, they held onto each other, the tension and fear of the last hours dissolving into the warm, shared moment. As their laughter faded, Caleb looked at Na with newfound wonder. What happens now? Na's smile turned mischievous. Now we celebrate, and I know just the thing. She reached into a pocket and pulled out a small container, the last of Caleb's ice cream, miraculously preserved through the chaos. Caleb raised an eyebrow. You kept that? Of course, Na said with a wink. I told you it was the most incredible thing I'd ever experienced. Well, almost the most incredible. Sharing the sweet treat, Caleb felt a deep sense of peace settling over him. For the first time in years, he wasn't running. He wasn't looking over his shoulder. He was simply home. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The barrier around Darkus held strong, its unique energy confounding any ships that ventured near. Caleb's former pursuers, unable to breach the planet's defenses, eventually abandoned their search. Life in the village found a steady rhythm. Caleb became an integral part of the community, sharing his knowledge of the wider galaxy while learning the customs and ways of Darkus. At first, the villagers were cautious around the Offworlder, but over time, they embraced him as one of their own. It was Na, though, who made Darkus feel truly like home. Her unyielding strength, boundless curiosity, and ability to find joy in the smallest things amazed Caleb every day. He fell more deeply in love with her as the days passed, though part of him still wrestled with the idea that he deserved this happiness. One evening, as the twin suns began their descent, Na led Caleb to a hilltop overlooking the village. The sky was painted in breathtaking hues of orange and violet, the jungle canopy stretching endlessly before them. It's beautiful, Caleb murmured, his voice soft with awe. Na nodded, her expression content. I used to come up here as a child, dreaming about what might be out there among the stars. Now I realize everything I ever wanted was here all along, Na said softly, turning to face him. Her violet eyes shimmered with emotion. I love you, Caleb, not despite your past, but because of it. Everything you've been through has shaped you into the man I want to share my life with. Caleb felt a lump rise in his throat. Even now, part of him couldn't shake the fear that this was all a dream, too good to be true. Na, I love you too, more than I ever thought possible. But, are you sure? After everything I've done, she placed a finger gently on his lips, silencing him. The past is behind us. What matters is the person you are now and the future we'll build together. With a playful smile, Na reached into the pouch at her hip, pulling out a piece of iridescent ice melter fruit and a small scoop of the last of their ice cream. Now, she said with a teasing grin, don't you think it's time we created the first ever Darkus Earth dessert fusion? Caleb chuckled, his doubts melting under the warmth of her humor and love. Together, They shared the strange yet delicious combination, and for the first time in years, Caleb felt the weight of his past lift completely. Here, on this extraordinary planet, with this remarkable woman, he had found what he thought he'd lost forever, a future worth fighting for. As the last rays of sunlight bathed the horizon in gold and violet, Caleb pulled Na close and kissed her deeply. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of Darkus and the love they shared, they weren't just two people from different worlds. They were each other's home. Hey there, fellow explorers of love and galaxies. Thanks for joining me on this interstellar journey of romance, redemption, and, of course, ice cream. I hope you enjoyed this trek through the jungles of Darkus as much as I enjoyed writing it. Let's be honest, though, if a stunning blue-skinned alien ever offers you a bite of exotic fruit, are you really going to say no? It might just be the start of a story for the ages, or at least one heck of a conversation starter. But now I need to ask you something, dear readers. As I crafted this tale, I started to wonder, did it soar like a starship on a clear flight path, or did it feel like it was running on recycled tropes? Were the themes as vibrant as Na's violet eyes, or did they land as flat as a malfunctioning hyperdrive? Let's face it, ancient alien technology saving the day might be getting as overused as Caleb's lucky space boots. So here's your mission. Tell me what you think. Did this story hit the mark like a perfectly timed blaster shot, or did it leave you colder than forgotten space ice cream? What kind of sci-fi adventures would you like to see next? Epic galactic wars, cyberpunk dystopias, comedy romance, or maybe a cooking competition set on a zero-gravity space station? Okay, that last one might just be my snack cravings talking. Your feedback means more to me than the heart of Darkus did to Caleb and Na. Drop your thoughts faster than Na can take down a squad of space soldiers. Whether you loved it, hated it, or landed somewhere in between, I want to hear it. After all, in the infinite expanse of the cosmos, your voice is what makes this journey worthwhile. Stay stellar, and may your adventures be cosmic.